Hello, and thank you for joining the podcast here. My name is Dr. Ware, and I'm going to talk to you everything informatics, healthcare, and healthcare technology. So, what if I told you the future of clinical trials doesn't require you to leave your home at all? That's right, I'm talking about telehealth, remote monitoring, and virtual consent are reshaping how life-saving treatments are being tested right now. So stick around as we break down the FDA's new guidelines that came out in the fall. These guidelines are on decentralized clinical trials and the new mode of operation of medical research and why this change could benefit millions of patients worldwide. First, what are decentralized clinical trials? So, DCTs incorporate remote elements like telehealth visits, digital health technologies, mobile health units, and home based data collection. Most of these trials before were all done in person, so we'll talk about that. So, why this matters? The COVID 19 pandemic forced researchers to pivot to these models, and now the FDA is making it clear that they're here. So some of the highlights from the FDA, again, this happened in fall of 2024. The areas that they covered first were remote visits, all right? So telehealth for assessments. This basically reduces the need for in-person clinic visits. They also focused on data integrity. They detailed protocols to limit data variability, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's hard to do. Privacy and compliance, ensuring patient data security during remote assessments, which is very important. Adverse events is another topic. They provided clear guidance for monitoring remote and reporting adverse effects remotely. And then we talk about recruitment and enrollment, expanding access to diverse populations while maintaining data quality. All right, so what are some benefits of decentralized trials? A couple that I can think of, right? We're talking about increased access to care, which is important. People in rural areas can finally some help with the clinical trials, right? You don't have to travel back and forth as much. It makes it much more accessible now. And it also improves recruitment and retention in a lot of these trials. So it reduces the patient's burden, leading to higher enrollment rates and higher retention rates. And then we also have the patient-centric approach that this has covered, right? More flexible for participants, potentially increases adherence and engagement. So these are all things that the potential benefits of this. Again, these guidelines just came in place, so it'll be a little bit before we see if it actually, was effective. But Dr. Keith and S. Usikin, I'm sorry if I butchered that name a little bit, but with over 30 years of clinical research, they highlight that DCTs can expand the catchment area for patient recruitment and utilize new technologies that may not have always been accessible at the centralized sites. All right, so some challenges and considerations. Talked about data variability. You do run the risk of inconsistent data from different remote locations. Again, you have to make sure that the data is not impacted by that person's environment at the time, right? Especially during the clinical trials. So it's important, and decreasing that data variability is tough in that aspect. Then you're going to have some technological barriers. Not all patients have access to reliable internet. When you're talking about increasing access to care, that means that some patients probably live in rural areas, and you want to try to catch those patients, right? You want to try to get them engaged. But a lot of rural areas don't have high-speed internet. Some do. You run into the risk of some patients not having the access to internet. That could hinder telehealth visits. It could also hinder the ability for them to use remote devices or Bluetooth devices potentially that need to connect to the internet as well. Sometimes, so there are a lot of risks that still are in that area. And then also training needs. Local healthcare providers that are going to be contributing to trials may lack formal clinical trial experience. Dr. Joseph M. Unger, he noted that the biggest risk would be data variability and inconsistent results due to the lack of uniformity and data collected from different locations. So basically what we just talked about there. All right, so the impact of COVID-19 on clinical trials. Let's touch on that. Pre-pandemic, traditional clinical site-based trials were the standard. Okay, during COVID-19, that's when we saw the boom. Right, that's when we saw the surge in telehealth really become a factor and really make a good impact. So the surge in remote consent and telehealth assessments and virtual monitoring, we saw that boom. Post-pandemic, the FDA's guidance cements that these changes are going to stay in place. These changes are going to telehealth is going to be here to stay. They just need to add some more guidance to it. There was a lot of questions around data security and privacy when telehealth became very popular, and that was a big concern. Now they're addressing it's a little bit down the line, right? Maybe 5 years later, but something like that happens. It usually takes some time for the guidelines to really come all together. So, what this means for the future of clinical research, phase 1 and 2 trials will still essentially remain the same. Phase 1 and 2 trials do really rely on early drug testing, and with that, you do want to be there in person. Just in case anything were to happen, you have providers right there with you. Now, phase 3 trials, these are large-scale studies designed to confirm the effectiveness of a new treatment, right? That's when you go in to monitor the side effects. You compare it to commonly used treatments. You collect information that will allow the treatment to be used safely. And these trials often involve thousands of participants across multiple locations. And this change that the FDA made, or the guidelines that they put in place, will really be effective for phase 3 trial. What's the last phase? So a drug can be produced and put out to the masses, right? So once you talk about the phase 3 trials and you get more people to take part of these clinical trials, the faster drugs can be developed and put out there. And, the more information that they can get back on these drugs, the more feedback that they can get back on these drugs, which is huge because we know that a lot of side effects, right, can happen to multiple different people depending on their genetics, the genetic makeup. The more that you're able to test these drugs, the more information and the safer it will become once it's ready, right, for the real world. All right, some challenges to consider. Regulatory compliance is ensuring that all remote data collection meets stringent regulatory standards. Data consistency, so managing the variability collected from different devices and locations, and then participation and engagement, right? You want to be able to maintain consistent communication and support for participants to ensure high retention rates. So those are some challenges that could arise still from this. So after all that, what do you guys think? Are decentralized clinical trials the future of medical research? Will they improve patient outcomes, or are there risks that we still have not fully explored yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share the video. I want to see what you guys think. I will be back dropping another video on the latest healthcare technology, healthcare policies and procedures, and anything else that is relevant in current times. Thank you guys so much for joining, and see you soon.